Hello and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm Kevin Castley. Thanks for being here tonight. Tonight, I'm going to be addressing something that has come up time and time again. It's tiring, and this needs to be debunked. It's this bunk and junk meme that we have in the political discourse that claims that, well, both communism and fascism are bad. Communism's better because at least the ideal is good. That is completely despicable. If you all will recall, when I, as well as Reese of Nightmare Fuel, debated Cogent Canine some months back when he came on the stream, he argued that Stalin was preferable to Hitler, not because Stalin didn't kill more people, he did, and we'll get to that, but that what Stalin was fighting for, the ideals of communism, were good, whereas what Hitler was fighting for was bad. No, I got news, dudes. They were both fighting for despicable ideologies. Now, we need to address what their ideologies were, what their utopias looked like. Because I'm so sick of this one-sided, completely biased narrative that paints, this outright maniacal villain type caricature of fascism, while at the same time arguing that the communists, well, they killed a lot of people, but they were well-meaning. Yeah, I got news. The fascists were well-meaning as well. What, you think like Hitler thought he was a bad guy? You think those people that were building National Socialism in Germany, you think that they thought that they were the bad guys? No. They thought that they were the good guys. Likewise, Stalin thought that he was good. He thought that he was protecting the revolution. He thought that he was holding what Marx wanted. And I got news. I've read a lot of Marx. Marx wanted a dictatorship of the proletariat. Stalin kind of fit that bill. Now, you can have all the idealists out there that call Stalin a degenerative version of the communist ideal. Bullshit. Read Marx. Marx specifically said you have to have a vanguard party and you have to have a dictatorship of the proletariat. Stalin was exactly that. He was a dictator of the proletariat. In other words, he didn't give a shit about the peasants. He starved the peasants into submission and death in order to uplift the prestige and the material conditions of the proletarian classes in the Soviet Union. And yeah, it was largely racially or ethnically motivated as well. He hated Ukrainians. So I'm done with this idea that the communists were fighting for something good and they just failed and it became bad. Whereas the Nazis, the fascists, they were fighting for something bad and it was bad. No, I'm so done with that. I'm so done with that. So I don't have the screenshots. I do have a couple screenshots for you all pretty soon to highlight a couple tweets. But you all are aware of this in the discourse, this benefit of the doubt to the communists, this caricature of fascists is just, pure evil. When, like I said, the communists killed far more people in the last century. I mean, you can talk about how, the fascists, they're bad, but the communists are well-meaning, bro. Yeah, try telling that to 10 million people who died in Ukraine between 1932 and 33, I believe it was. Try telling that to the 6 million people or so who died under Pol Pot. Try telling that to the 100 million or so who died under Mao. I mean, they were well-meaning. They weren't malicious, dude. It was an accident, bro. Well, one, no, it wasn't. It was stochastic-ish. It's not like the famine. It's not like the starvation was like a specific thing. Like Stalin said, now you starve per se. That happened. The gulags were a thing. But it was by and large a mass terror weapon. He characterized starvation as a means of political terror that you use to starve your enemies into submission. Just because the Nazis made up lists and had groups that they specifically targeted. Well, yeah, Stalin did too, but it was more of a general thing. You put some policies into practice, you collectivize the agriculture, you requisition the grain, everybody starves to death. The people that went to the collective farms starve first before even the kulaks. I mean, read Confessions of a True Believer if you want to see how that works, that those who were first to obey the government were also first to die under Stalin, because he didn't care. It was indiscriminate. It was, you are peasants, you are Ukrainian, you can go to the grave, right? I don't care if you're loyal or you're disloyal. And in fact, if you were disloyal and you did hoard some grain, you were actually more likely to survive the Holodomor. But nobody ever freaking talks about the Holodomor. Everybody talks about the Holocaust, which is rightfully so. But almost as many people died in the Holodomor. Never mind everybody else who died in the Soviet Union. We're talking a death toll here, which, I mean, conservatively, 20 million. Liberally speaking, upwards of 60 million. It depends on how you characterize the war deaths and whatnot. Obviously, it's not good enough to just say, oh, Hitler started the war, so all those Soviets' deaths you can attribute to Hitler. No. Look at how Stalin handled the war. Look at how he treated those who fought and those who were living in occupied territory, liberated territory, etc. I'm done. I'm done with this idea that the communists are somehow better than the fascists. And this is going to be controversial. I know it's going to be controversial. And why is that? And why is this so prevalent? Why is this such a prevalent meme? Because it's not like my opponents here are necessarily outright saying that Stalin was good or these people were good. That's not the point. The point is that they're saying that they were better than the fascists. Well, how? They killed more people. What they were fighting for was despicable. Well, see, that's the thing. They don't actually think what they were fighting for was despicable. These people that you see making this argument are biased towards the left. Now you can say, oh, Kevin, you're biased towards the right. Yeah, sure. Fair enough, right? Fair enough. But somebody has to be the voice of reason here to call out all this bullshit and the communist apologetics. We got a lot of far lefties. We got a lot of social democrats. We got a lot of leftist center people that look at what Stalin did and they say, yeah, well, he killed more people, but imagine if he had succeeded. Yeah, imagine if he had succeeded. How many more people would have died? Unbelievable. So I'm going to be making a case here. And yeah, might this sound edgy? Might this sound controversial? I don't care. I really don't care. Because somebody needs to speak truth to the brainlet brigades. And here's the deal. There's a reason why symbols of the Soviet Union are okay to walk around with. You can wear, like, I've seen people on work, I've seen people at school, I've seen people on the bus. Back when I used to ride the bus, I've seen people downtown unironically wearing, communist insignia, red hammer and sickle, all that kind of stuff, or like even those jokey, like, Communist Party shirts and stuff. They just wear them, and a lot of them are actually like communists, and they just wear them, and it's like, oh, it's kind of edgy-ish, but it's socially acceptable. But if you wear a swastika, you wear like a t-shirt that's like, poking fun at, like, the Nazis, like, oh, it's a Nazi party or whatever. It's like people are going to look at you and people might fight you. But again, the Nazis killed fewer people than the Soviets. So what's up with that? Well, here's the deal. There are two factors that go into this. One is the Soviets were victors, and the victors write the annals of history, right? Second is the Soviets were allies. This is part of that first part, which is that they were our allies. So they're seen as better. And the second point, the actual second point here, is that teachers, professors, those in elitist sort of circles, in academia, in the media, in, just in general, in terms of, business, etc., these people lean left. These people definitely have a left-wing bias. And are they communists? No, not necessarily. There are a lot of communist professors, but not all of them. There are a lot of people that are, they're left of center. And them being left of center leads them to conclude that, well, Stalin was bad and the things he did were bad. At least he was fighting for something good because he was on the left. Well, that's pathetic. You're not going to see me here because I'm on the right saying that Hitler was fighting for something good because he was on the right. I condemn both of them. What Hitler was fighting for was disgusting, but let's keep it real. What Stalin was fighting for was also disgusting. The ideal of communism is despicable. We're talking global starvation. We're talking global tyranny. We're talking global oppression. And yeah, we're talking absolute, no matter how you cut it, whether you go the anarchist direction or the tanky direction, we're talking absolute depravity. Either you have anarchism and everybody eats each other in The Lord of the Flies, the state of nature, as Thomas Hobbes would describe it, or you go the Stalinist type route, the dictatorship of the proletariat, and the party is the one carrying out the murder and the destruction. And there's still a system of order, but yes, there are lists that are drawn up. And I'm done. I'm so done. I'm so done with this idea that the ideals of communism are good. Oh, but what's the ideals of communism, bro? It's like, yeah. Oh, but you don't understand, man. The ideals of fascism, I've had this argument posed to me several times that the ideas of fascism, the ideals of it, I should say, the goals are genocide and death. Whereas with communism, the goals at least are like equality and stuff, right? That's pathetic. How can you not see the bias in there? Because you're painting a rosy version of communism, saying that, oh, equality. Yet there are many ways that you could characterize the objective of communism. Some could say that their end state is to lower everybody to the same level. That's also equality. It's a different way of phrasing it. Equality sounds kind of good, right? Well, here's the deal. You have to treat these two ideologies, you have to be fair to both of them. You either have to be fair in the negative to both of them or fair in the positive to both of them. You don't get to say, oh, but the fascists, their goal is genocide and death. No, that's not their goal. Likewise with the communists, you say, oh, their goal is genocide and death. It's like, well, no, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about their actual ideals, how they would describe their ideology, Stalin would say, oh, yeah, he's fighting for equality. But if you asked Hitler, are you fighting for genocide and death? No, he wouldn't tell you that. What would he tell you? He would say, I'm fighting for homogeneity. I'm fighting for strength. I'm fighting for tradition. I'm fighting for hierarchy. I'm fighting for morality. Like, he would use all these positive terms. He wouldn't say, oh, I'm fighting for like, again, if you're dumb enough to think that he thought that he was the bad guy, you're crazy. Stalin and Hitler both thought that they were doing the right thing. You need to get out from under a rock and understand that these people didn't think of themselves as supervillains. They thought of themselves as heroes fighting for what they believed in and their ideology and everything. And again, if you're going to say, oh, well, communism, they might do bad things, but they want equality, then you can't say, oh, but the fascists, they do bad things and they want death. No, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt too and say, well, here's what the fascists want. If we're going to say that the communists want these things that we're painting a rosy image of, then you have to likewise paint a rosy image of fascism because it's not fair otherwise. Now, I would paint a rosy image of neither. I would say, here's what the communists are fighting for. They're fighting for global enslavement. And here's what the fascists are fighting for. They're basically similarly fighting for global enslavement, but they're fighting for, chauvinism, that kind of stuff. But here's what the fascists would say. If you actually ask the fascists, and I've spoken with fascists and stuff before in the past, I find it interesting. Likewise, I've talked to a lot of communists. There are a lot of communists. There are a lot more communists around today than there are fascists. But the fascists, they don't say that their end goal is like genocide and death. Likewise, with the communists, they say that's a means to an end. Well, what's their end? I want to see what's their end. Because if we're trying to have an argument or a discussion about which one's better and ideal, we have to understand what the ideals of both are. Well, what's the ideal of communism? If we're being nice to them, we say, oh, it's equality. It's, everybody at the same level. And if we're talking about fascism, what's the ideal? They would say tradition, morality, hierarchy, homogeneity. These kinds of things. Now, you can think of those things as bad, right? Like, you can think of those things as really bad. Like, let's say you're against tradition or whatever. Okay. But you don't get to paint the view of communism that the communists want you to have, but then paint a negative view of fascism that fascists themselves would reject. It's like you have to be fair to both. Now, here's the actual way of looking at it, which I think is fair to both, which doesn't give them the benefit of the doubt. You say, well, here's what the communists want. They want to essentially plunder and bring everybody down to the lowest possible level, essentially. That's what happens, right? And they want everybody to be at the same level, except for the leader, essentially, and that's it. And then what do the fascists want? Well, the fascists want, and what do they want? They basically want ethno-states. Like, their end goal, like, there are a lot of fascists out there that they don't even want genocides per se. If they could have it their way, they would just deport everybody that wasn't, matching their homogeneity. And they would just have, 200 countries where each country was its own ethnicity or whatever. That's kind of their end state. Whereas with communists, their goal is like world domination. It's, every part of the world under the party. So they're really different in that sense. If they both had their end goal in the world, what would it see? The communists would take over the world and basically starve everybody. And the fascists, every country would be fascist, but there'd be like hundreds of countries, and they'd all be ethno-states. And they do genocides within their borders, and they'd attack each other and whatnot, but the world would be still mostly fragmented. That's kind of the ideal of fascism. They don't really want to like take over the world. They just want to have like their own country be 100% their own race, whatever, that kind of thing. So I'm done with this idea that we're going to be nice, that we're going to give the commies the benefit of the doubt, but call out the fascists. No, we're going to call out both of them. We're going to call out both of them. Now, again, if what I said, when I tried to paint, a benefit of the doubt image of fascism to you, when I said, well, no, if you ask them what they believe in, they wouldn't say they believed in genocide. They'd say they believe in things that they see as positives, like tradition, hierarchy, homogeneity, and morality. Now, if those things make you uncomfortable and you say, hey, those are bad, dude, well, how do you think I feel when I hear the communists say, oh, we just want equality? Because I know what equality means. Equality means exactly what it looked like under Pol Pot. It looks exactly like what it looked like under Stalin or what it looked like under Mao. It means everybody's emaciated and living in terror, except for the dear leader. That's what equality means. So I'm so done. I'm so done with this idea that the communists were somehow better. Oh, yeah, they might have killed more people, but at least they were fighting for something good. No, the only way that you can think that that's good is if you're a fucking leftist, if you're far left, essentially. There are a lot of people that are on the left that should not be embracing this kind of thing. Like, let's say that you're a social democrat. I don't really like your ideology. I think it's goofy. I think it's unsustainable. I think it relies on a country like the United States paying for your military defense so you can have your like free healthcare or whatever. But okay, I'm not really going to think you're a communist. If you're a social democrat out there, just a pro tip, if you're a social democrat and you're going to say, oh, well, communism, they were bad, but they were fighting for something good, you might actually be a lot more sympathetic to communism than you would like to think or lead on to. Because a lot of social democrats will try to tout themselves as left-leaning, but they understand the market and they're okay with capitalism. BS. If you're somebody who's out there and you're a social democrat and you're saying things like, well, Stalin was fighting for something good, you're not really a social democrat. You are a socialist. Like, just be honest about it, okay? Just admit you're far left. What's with all this branding yourself as somehow capitalist? It's because you know that capitalism is normal and you want to somehow infiltrate the normal part of the political spectrum. By the way, there aren't that many fascists around these days, which is good. It's good, right? I'm against fascism. Like, that's part of the reason why this channel exists. I mean, I don't know if you watch my videos and stuff, I'm kind of against fascists, but here's the deal. I wish that there were as many communists as there are fascists. I wish that they were just fringe, tiny fringes. I think it's a good thing that people feel like socially frightened if they might appear in public wearing like fascist propaganda or something, or like pro-Hitler stuff. They're going to be like, oh man, people are going to look at me weird. That's good. I just wish that people would do the same thing with communists. They killed more people. Their end goal is equally as disgusting. Like, so screw you if you're a communist, if you believe in communism. Screw you if you're a tanky. Screw you even more if you're a communist idealist, because you're going to pave the road to hell while telling everybody it's going to be rainbows and butterflies. So you're even more dangerous than the tankies, because at least the tankies are honest salesmen and they'll tell you, oh yeah, it'll be mass graves, bro. Let's do the revolution. At least they're honest about what's going to happen. And honestly, a lot of the fascists, let's keep it real, at least fascists I've talked to, they're pretty honest about what would happen. A lot of the commies, they're not. They're disingenuous. They say things like, oh, that wasn't true communism, bro. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's a good thing that there are hardly any fascists around, and it's a bad thing that there are a ton of communists around. We should make them both rare and fringe and ostracized. And I don't want anybody here to take this as somehow apologetics towards fascism. I just simply want to point out here, if it made you uncomfortable to hear things like homogeneity and strength and tradition, if it made you uncomfortable to hear those as positives of fascism, because you know that the fascists, they killed a lot of people, you know about the Holocaust. Likewise, I would hope that you would check yourself and understand how offensive it is when you say things like how communism, well, it's about equality and good things. Yeah, tell that to the 10 million people who died in Stalin's starvation in the Holodomor. I'm so done. Like, how is it that we're in the year 2020 and there are people unironically identifying as communists today? And moreover, how is it that when they do it, people don't look at them the same way that they would if they said that Hitler was their daddy? Oh, it's okay, bro. Stalin was my daddy. Really? No, that's even worse. Stalin killed more people. So we're going to get to some screenshots and we're going to go over the arguments. I know we have an active chat, but I've got to finish my my speech here. So this came out today. Even Stevens, school computer boy, he tweeted out, the only reason that the USSR gets any good PR is because it happened to go to war with the only 20th century country worse than it. Now, kind of weird coming from Even Stevens, because he's cool with my balance of powers and stuff. So how does he know what's worse? He's a realist. Anyway, I responded to it, a bit controversial here. And the only reason we think that the USSR was better was because they won. And that's not really true. I didn't get that much time. I was busy. I was rushed. And you don't get that many characters on Twitter. But I would have said two reasons. One, because they won. Two, because all the teachers these days are literal communists, or at least lefty. So they're sympathetic to the communists. So anyway, the Soviets killed far more people than Hitler. Nobody ever talks about the Holodomor, though. Like, I'm not saying don't talk about the Holocaust. I'm saying recognize both. And I asked him, I followed it up with a little cheeky, also, how's the school computer doing, Ian? Because, of course, he said that we would debate, but we'd have to wait until mid-August until he had his school computer. BS. Anyway, it's mid-August. He doesn't have his school computer, apparently. So then this dude here replies, come the F on, mate. Even if the USSR killed more folks. No, look at this. This is what I'm talking about. Like, you think that I'm responding to a straw man here? No way. This is a real meme in the discourse. And I'm here to debunk it because it's bunk and junk. He says, even if USSR killed more folks. So we're already in whack territory right now. Even if they killed more folks than Nazi Germany, there's a huge difference between intentionally mass murdering folks and unintentionally killing folks due to bad policy. Oh my God. Yikes, man. So clearly this guy hasn't read much about Stalin. He doesn't really understand what the Holodomor was. He doesn't understand that Stalin literally used starvation as a political tool, that it wasn't just that Stalin meant well, but he messed up. No, he purposefully starved the peasantry. He requisitioned the grain from the kolkhozes so that he could fund his industrial boom, his 5-year plans. Look into it. Read a history book, my dude. Loser. Anyway, he says, also, you can't ignore the relative time horizons for each nation. Now, what I think he's getting at here in that final sentence is that, well, the Nazis didn't last as long, so it's not really fair to compare them to the Soviets. BS. Soviets killed 10 million people in 2 years in the Holodomor. The Holocaust lasted much more than 2 years, and it killed about, 11 million people or so. It's about 6 million Jews, 5 million other minorities. That happened over the period of about, it ranges, but we're talking a few years at least, so a longer time horizon, in fact. Now, of course, most of the deaths were outside of those genocides, right? I mean, but like, okay, so his argument is you can't ignore the relative time horizons for each nation. In other words, the Soviets lasted longer, so even though they killed more people, it's a lower per year death toll. BS. Absolute BS. Look at how many countries the Soviets gave rise to. Communist China killed about 100 million people. Shouldn't we count that? They were communists. Oh, we're not going to count them because they're not the USSR. BS. They only existed because of the USSR. Are we going to count the 8 million people killed in North Korea since 1948? Are we going to count the 6 million killed in Cambodia? Are we going to count the thousands killed under Castro? Are we going to count all those who died in Albania, in Yugoslavia, in Romania, and Hungary, and Czech? Like what? What do you mean? If we're including the time horizons, that makes it even worse for the communists. And if we go to the ideal, what's the ideal here? The Nazis take over the world and kill a bunch of people. No, they weren't really going to take over the world. They were going to take over Europe and Soviet Union. Ideally, that was what they wanted to do. And then Japan was going to take over a bunch of the world, and Italy was going to take over a bunch of Africa and stuff. And then there probably still would be a United States. The world would be basically carved up into a multipolar world. They would never really take over the world. The Soviets, if they took over the world, which was their goal was to globalize the world under communism. Imagine the Soviet Union, imagine the Holodomor, except now it's worldwide. If I had to wager money on it, I would say the communists kill more people if they take over the world than the fascists do. That's just my view of it. So, now that's not to say that the fascists are good or anything. No, it's not. They're both despicable. It's just that communism is an ideology that views people as indiscriminately bad. It rejects human nature. It views human nature as degenerate. Whereas with fascism, to somewhat to its credit, is a lot more honest about human nature and more comes to term with human nature, that we are vicious and we require hierarchies. Otherwise, we will destroy each other and we will pillage each other and we will burn each other to the ground. Whereas communism rejects all of that. It rejects things like the need for food, for love, all these kinds of things in service of this abstract notion of the party. Now, the fascists do a lot of that too, don't get me wrong. It's just, at least there's some recognition that humans are vicious in fascism and therefore require some sort of order. Whereas, of course, communism in its ideal is stateless and it has a dictatorship of the proletariat to get there. So they kill everybody, starve everybody, etc. I'm convinced more people would die if Stalin took over the world in that sense. But that's beside the point here. I'm just saying, if we're talking about time horizons, let's give them 1,000 years. Who kills more? Probably the communists. That's just my view of it, though. But again, now, why is that the case? Why is that the case? Well, here's an important point that gets missed in all of this. They're both evil. But in fascism, there's an in-group and there's an out-group. If you're in the out-group, you're screwed. They will genocide you, or at least enslave you. If you're in the in-group, well, you're probably going to be fine. Like, you'll get your bread, you'll get your job, you'll have roads, that kind of stuff. Like, look at Germany, for example. If you're in the German in-group, you're like, yeah, you're getting by okay. It still sucks. It's a dictatorship, but it is what it is. If you're in the out-group in Germany, you're literally going to the death camps. Now, let's look at the Soviet Union. There's no in-group or out-group. Now you might say to me, Kevin, come on, man. What do you mean? There's a party and then there's everybody else. Yeah, I got news. If you were in the party, you were more likely to be killed than if you were an average person. The party was not the in group in the Soviet Union. There was no in group. Everybody was the out group. Everybody's the out group under communism because communism views human nature as evil and degenerate and counter revolutionary. So if you're human under communism, you're the out group unless you're the dear leader. North Korea is a good example of this. In North Korea, you're given rations by the state. And if you eat one kernel of corn more than the allotted rations, you will be shot. Now you say, oh, but you were hungry. Yeah, well, your hunger is right wing. Your hunger is counterproductive. It's counter revolutionary. Your hunger is degenerate. That's how communists think, right? So in communism, everybody starves. Everybody's emaciated. You would think in the Soviet Union, well, what about the great Russian people? Weren't they the in-group? Stalin declared them to be above everybody else in Russia or the Soviet Union. No, actually, Russians had a very high rate of being purged in the Great Terror. They had a higher rate than some of the minority groups, actually. And additionally, right before the war, Stalin killed about 95% of his generals and his top brass in the Red Army. I think it was a little over like 680 generals out of like 720 or something were murdered. They were just taken aback and shot. And you're like, why? Those people, you would think they were the elites, that they were on the inside. They were in the party. Yeah, that's why Stalin was worried that they might pose a challenge to him, so he had them shot. Saddam Hussein did the same thing too. There is no in-group under communism. Everybody is an enemy under communism. So everybody's suspicious under communism. So that's the difference right there. That's why I'm convinced that if the communists got the world, they would kill more people than if fascists took over the world. Because fascists taking over the world is like 100 different countries that are their own ethno-states going to war with each other and stuff. Communism, it's one country, one great leader, and it's all like North Korea or the Soviet Union or China or Albania, right? So I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm absolutely done with this idea here that we're going to be nice to the communists. What I hope is that we start treating communists the same way that we would treat fascists. Like, seriously, like for me, if I see somebody on the bus wearing a Soviet flag or something like that, that's the same as a swastika. Like, I'm going to have the absolute grotesque repulsion for them as I would if they were like a fan of Hitler or something. So done. I'm so done. I can't get over the fact that we're in 2020 and there are still people that think that communism was okay or good or somehow justified or somehow it was fighting for something ideal. It was deep, bro. Yeah, the only thing deep about communism, bro, was the mass graves. So read a history book. So no, I'm done. I'm done. So we're gonna move on to the second one here, the second screenshot, and then I'll get to the chat. So I tweeted out, I said, I'm so sick of the brainlets trying to tell me communism is somehow better than fascism. They both suck, but at least under fascism, if you happen to be in the in-group, you can get along fine. In communism, there is no in-group. Everyone suffers, everyone starves, everyone dies, essentially. And then we had some guy here, he responds, I'd say that's not necessarily true. Party members and military members often receive better treatment than the general populace. Well, that's wrong. Look at the Soviet Union. If you were in the Red Army, you were more likely to be executed under Stalin if you were a general than if you were just an average soldier. You were way more likely to get purged the higher up you were in society. You were seen as more of a threat, more dangerous. So there is no in-group. Like party members, look at the Red Terror. Who was the most likely to be killed in the Red Terror? It was party members. It wasn't average Soviet people. Now, some of them did go to the Gulag. About 3% of them went to the Gulag. But if you were in the party, it wasn't 3%, bro. It was huge, dude. There's a good not a documentary, a good film about it, Burnt by the Sun. It's from the 90s, I believe. Really good. Really good. Really surreal film. Really dark film, for sure. So, about the Red Terror in the 1938 in the Soviet Union. He writes, major cities are also deliberately propped up. while the countryside suffers. So you could argue that the urban citizens are also more privileged. No, yeah, the case that you could make is that the proletariat under communism is the in group, and the peasantry under communism is the out group, and the peasants are starved while the proletariat is fed. You can make that argument ish, except that let's keep it real. A lot of the proletariat was still purged. A lot of the proletariat still starved. A lot of the proletariat, well, yes, they were slightly better off than if you were on a kolkhoz. You were not treated as well in the Soviet Union for being proletariat as you were in Nazi Germany for like being in their in group, for example. So there's a more clear in group and out group in fascism than there is under communism. Again, under communism, everybody is essentially an out group. It's just that the peasants are more of an out group. You know, they're seen as conservative, backward, counter-revolutionary, that kind of thing. So they must be starved and they must be beaten into submission. That's how the communists think, right? So Maoism is a little bit different. But of course, Mao killed even more people. So we will get into the chat now. Those are the only two ones that I want to go over tonight. Again, this is a controversial stream. Now, why is it controversial? Why should it be controversial to say that fascism and communism were both equally morally evil, but then also state the historical fact that the communists killed more people than fascists? Why should that even be controversial? I'll tell you why it's controversial. We got a ton of communists online, and we got a lot of left-leaning people that are sympathetic to communism online. And what I would say to those people is, why hide? Why not be honest? Why not call yourself a communist? If you think Stalin was fighting for something good, just say you're a communist. Don't give me this social democrat. Don't give me this progressive. Don't give me any of this BS. Just be honest with me. Just say, yeah, you know, I think it's good because I'm a communist. At least you're not being disingenuous then. At least we can be like, okay, you're an enemy. Thank you. I can recognize the enemy now, right? Thank you for making it obvious to us. But here's the deal, right? These people, they really do think that they're better. They think that to somehow draw an equivalence between communism and fascism is like, well, oh, it's horseshoe theory, bro. One, horseshoe theory is true. Two, I'm not drawing an equivalence here. I'm literally telling you the communists killed more people than the fascists. I'm not saying they're equal. Mao, upwards of 100 million. Stalin, upwards of 60 million dead. Pol Pot, we're talking like 6 million people dead. What's his name? Enver Hoxha's Albania, we're talking a couple 100,000 people dead. The Warsaw Pact states in Europe, we're talking, in the millions of dead from the terror. We're talking about North Korea, 8 million people dead since 1948. And then what do we have on the other side? Well, we got Nazi Germany. They did about 11 million people in the Holocaust. Obviously, they did the war in Europe. We're talking about 20 million dead from the war, for example. We've got a huge number of people that died in the war on the Soviet side that were like a result of the party and their handling of it. We've got, Italy. They killed, when I checked, it was like several 100,000 people. We've got Japan killed about 20 million people. So, you could say that the fascists killed about, across the board. We also can throw in Franco and Pinochet. But again, Franco, like if we're talking about like modern day-ish fascists, Franco and Pinochet are like two that come to mind. Franco killed a couple 100,000 people, and he was a NATO ally. He was part of NATO until he died. He was Franco's fascist Spain was part of NATO, a loyal ally against the Soviets. And then we had Pinochet, another fascist. Those guys killed like together like 210,000 people. That's nothing compared to how many people their counterparts in the East killed. So again, it's apples to oranges. They're both bad. They're both rotten in this case, both rotten fruits. But one's killed a hell of a lot more people than others. So I'm done. I'm done with this idea that we're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the communists because they believed in something good. No, the only way that you could think that they believed in something good is if you are far left. Again, just be honest about it. Just be honest, because I'm right of center here and I'm condemning fascism. Why can't you condemn communism? I'm condemning the ideal of fascism. Why can't you condemn the ideal of communism? That's my question, right? If you're on the far left, or if you're a social democrat or whatever, if you're anybody who's going to say, yeah, but at least Stalin was fighting for something good. No, because you don't see me here saying that Hitler was fighting for something good. I'm calling out what they did, and I'm calling out what they believed in. I'm against fascism. I'm against it in practice and in ideal. But I'm also against communism in practice and in ideal. Yet the brainlets on the left, they're only against communism in practice. They're not against it in ideal. Well, how do you think you get to that ideal? There's a reason why every time it's been tried, it was communism in practice. I mean, come on. So they're going to pave the road to hell with quote unquote good intentions. What? We're going to be like, oh, comrades, just trust me. You know, I know we've done this 63 times before and like people died and stuff across the world, but like just give me all the power and like we can have a utopia, bro. You won't have to like work for minimum wage anymore. Pathetic. So we'll take a look at the chat now. We got Dr. Zayas here. Yo, yo. Wilson writes, damn USSR flags should be treated like the Nazi swastika. I agree. Good morning from Cyprus. Good morning, Jay. That's a troll. I like this one from Wilson. Fascism massacres minorities, communism massacres majorities. Well, the reality is, when we look at the last century, fascism massacres minorities and purges some in the majority. Communism massacres majorities as well as minorities. So, you know, Ukrainians, Tatars, Uyghurs, etc. Right? Like communists, they hate everybody. Like if you're a human and you have human nature, you are counter-revolutionary, and you need to be dealt with. Atheist Gone Wild says, under fascism, you die if you're a minority. Under communism, you all die equally. See, that's the thing. That's the thing. I'm not, like, again, I don't want this to come across as apologetics, but I'm also not going to say because of that, I'm not going to talk about it. Somebody needed to say this, okay? Because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of communism being treated as somehow different than fascism. Absolutely sick of it. John Smith's Basement says, bro, what happened to the webcam? Gone over that before. I need a new computer. Wilson says, who's the dislikes? I haven't checked. Do we have dislikes? Oh, we probably have dislikes. We probably got big dislikes, actually. Probably got big dislikes on this. Probably got the Brainlet Brigades from CommieTube and Commie Twitter on here. Like, oh, look at this chud. Look at this chud. He's going to tell me that Stalin and Hitler were both bad. Only Hitler was bad. Stalin was good. Pathetic. Yeah, these guys look like this. That wasn't real socialism. That was a USA sabotage. What a joke. Yeah, this is what the communists look like right now after like 40 minutes of me calling them out. Oh, they're triggered, dude. Oh, they're triggered. Okay, we only got one dislike so far. We only got 9 likes though. Let's get that likes up. Let's at least get that to 10 likes. Let's go. Zaya says everybody needs to be on the same page for either fascism or communism to work. And the only way to get everyone in agreement is to kill everyone who doesn't agree with you. Yep. Wilson says, yeah, Hitler wanted Russia is Germany's Wild West. Oh, I know about the Lebensraum things. I know that like they basically want to kill most or all of the Slavs. I get that. Imagine Stalin took over all of Europe. How many people would have died in other Holodomors? Would there still be some Germans left? Sure. But more people would have starved for sure if the Soviets took over the world than if the Nazis took over the world. That's just what I'm saying here. Now, they're both evil. Again, don't get me wrong. They're both evil. But again, my question is, why use rosy language to describe what the communists were fighting for, but then use dark language to describe what the fascists were fighting for? Why not use dark language for both? I don't get that. Oh, yeah. Those were just bad harvests. Yeah, that was an accident. Yeah, I had some brainlet try to tell me that it was an accident, even though Stalin planned it out. That was his way to force the Ukrainians into submission. An accident. What a joke. A leftist would probably make a moral equivalency argument about Churchill. Oh, for sure. They think that like Churchill was worse than Stalin. Zaya says it's mid-August and I don't see any school computers. Yeah, that's because Ian Stevens is a fraidy cat. Yeah, they accidentally sent millions to the gulags. Great point. Communists owned. Says, yeah, it's a common misconception that the starvation was unintentional. It was definitely an intentional genocide. Yeah, one of the reasons why that meme that it was an accident is out there is because Stalin's boy, FDR, was an admirer. He's basically enamored and in love with Stalin. And he made films. You can check this out. You can fact check me. You can watch it yourself. Watch Mission to Moscow from 1942, I believe it was. Check it out. Warner Brothers film. It talks about how everything that Stalin was doing was just, how Stalin's fighting the traitors, the enemies of the revolution, and how the American people need to stand with Comrade Stalin. And FDR himself was just enamored. He was in love with Stalin. He looked at the 5-year plans and thought, like, why can't we have socialism in America? Like, again, this might be controversial too. I'm a fan of Truman, but I got no love for FDR. Now, you might say, well, but Kevin, you talk about working with bad guys to get at greater evils all the time. Like, what about Saudi? All that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, I get that. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have worked with the Soviet Union, but you do it like how Churchill did. You do it professionally. You go to the meetings. You're cold. You don't smile. You don't joke around with Stalin. You're like, I'm here. We're here. We're in a war. We're in an existential battle for our lives. You are a menace. You are a disgrace. You've killed tens of millions of people. And if you take over, the world would be no better than if Hitler took over. That's what Churchill was like. Oh, but he was a conservative. Conservative's bad. What it should. But then we look at FDR, and FDR's writing beautiful love letters to Stalin for years. And Stalin's writing back to him. And FDR is like, I love your 5-year plans, bro. It's pathetic. Imagine unironically thinking that FDR was good. He basically tried to make himself a dictator in America too, but that's a topic for a different video. But like, people talk about how Trump is like trying to be a dictator. BS. FDR was way closer to a dictator than Trump ever was. Oh yeah, don't even get me started on LBJ and FDR. Oh, I agree. Yeah, no love. John Smith's Basement says those school computers must have a lot of RAM because they're taking a lot of time to boot up. Not enough RAM, though. I'd say probably not enough RAM. Yeah, but this is the point, right? Kirk's right here. He says capitalism is better than both communism and fascism. It's not even close. Not even close. Oh, here's a hot take. He says, honestly, I think China would have been better if Japan ran it. Okay, here's what's crazy. The Japanese Empire killed like 20 million people. And a lot of them were in Japan or in China. They were vicious. They were brutal. They did genocide against the Chinese people. And if they were able to take over the country, imagine how many people they would have killed. Here's what's sad. I have a hard time thinking the Japanese Empire running China would have killed 100 million people last century. They might have killed 50 million. They might have killed 70 million. I doubt that they would have killed as many people as Mao did. And Mao was Chinese. So communists, they have no allegiance to their nation at all. They don't care. They're like, we don't care that these are people in my country. They deserve to die. They're counter-revolutionaries. They have things like hunger. What a bunch of chuds, bro. I mean, think about how sad that is when fascist enemies would kill fewer of your people than your own leader if they're a communist. Like how sad is that? That right there is the greatest proof why you should never flirt with communism ever. It's amazing. Prozac says we defeated the wrong enemy. No, I disagree. I've said before, what I would have done right after World War II is I would have nuked the Soviet Union. I would have liberated them like by 1946. I would have nuked the hell out of their industrial centers. So they wouldn't have been able to continue the tank manufacturing. I would have like nuked, their factories and stuff in the Urals and in the European corridors. So, but Truman didn't want to do it. Truman was like, no, the people are tired and stuff, tired of the war. So therefore, we got a 40-year Cold War that almost ended the world. Sad. Like, I like Truman. Truman was an anti-communist, but he wasn't as nuke-pilled as I would have been. So, Kirk says fascism and communism both have a negative view of humanity, hence the collectivism and authoritarianism. They think people are too corrupt and immoral to be trusted with freedom. Yeah, I mean, they're both collectivists at their core. That's a good point. Both collectivists. But then you got these commies out there and the leftists out there that say, yeah, but communism's a good form of collectivism. Well, you might be a collectivist then. Yeah, and Kirk agrees. He says communists should be treated the same as Nazis. Oh, and he likes that line from me. I've used this line a few times. It's something I'm pretty proud of, actually. You know, another one from me is that the most brutal comrade always prevails. That'd be like my line for Vosh. Like if I had a political law, Castley's law, it would be that the most brutal comrade always prevails. That's why you never get your true communism, whatever the hell that means. By the way, like I said, I don't even want true communism. It would suck even if the ideal happened. Oh, really? You're never allowed to have any individual ingenuity. You're never allowed to be better than anybody else. You're never allowed to succeed. You all have to be poor together. That sounds miserable. Even in the ideal, it's miserable. Never mind the practice. Yeah, and then we got Prozac. He says, I still don't see the goose steppers out my window. I do, however, see a ton of angry, pale people in all black. I think they need steak. Yeah, no, we have hardly any actual fascists left. Like, despite what the the communists will tell you, like Vosh, despite what they'll say, where they'll call everybody a fascist. They literally call Ben Shapiro a fascist. Ben Shapiro a fascist. He's a supporter of Israel. He's Jewish. They call him a fascist. uh, they call Charlie Kirk a fascist. Vosh calls Charlie Kirk a fascist and a neocon. Okay, way to prove that you don't understand anything about politics. That's like calling somebody a capitalist and a communist. It's like, what? It's like, what? A fascist and a neocon. I got news, dudes. Neocons want to bomb fascists. That's part of the whole point of neoconservatism. You know? Regime change. Yeah, but we got a lot of communists around. Antifa's a big thing right now. You don't really see too many fascists out there, but you see a lot of Antifa losers. So they're a much bigger threat these days. So, oh, we got a big chat tonight. We got an active chat tonight, my friends. Oh, we got Wyatt here. That's based. We got Kirk. He says some communist brainlets insist that communism never evolved into the ideal anarchist stage, so it's never been tried. But a stateless society, i.e., anarchy, is an impossible ideal. Well, it is possible. It would look like what Thomas Hobbes described, the state of nature. Poor, brutish, short, nasty, everybody raping and killing each other. That's what anarchy would look like. It is possible. We could do it if we wanted, but I don't really want to go down that road. What says, isn't it really messed up that communism is so bad that regardless if it is trying to murder its citizens or not, millions of people still die? See, that's another thing. That's another thing. With Mao, I can see the case that even upwards of 40 million people under Mao were, I would say, stochastically intentionally murdered, but you can make the argument accidentally ish. But like, so Mao accidentally killed more people than Hitler did on purpose. A lot more. Doesn't that tell you something about communism? That even when it's not outright trying to kill people, it still kills more people than when fascism is trying to kill people? Like, that's crazy. But we don't really think about those numbers. Oh, it doesn't matter. They're Chinese, bro. There's a billion of them anyway, so what does it matter? That's like our attitude, right? It's pathetic. That's human life, but we don't care. We don't teach it in schools. Oh, because they're communists, and all the high school teachers are all a bunch of freaking communists, too. So, of course, they're not going to teach it because it makes their ideology look bad. And they brainwash their students to be lefties and communists, too. It's like a gateway. You start off with a little bit of social justice, and then you wind up with literal communism. You know? It's the social justice to Stalinism pipeline. It's a thing. Look at Twitter. Different degrees of it, different stages of it. But they all go down the same path. They all wind up making apologetics for Stalin and Mao. They all do. Even the most anarchistic of them. And you might say, well, what about Vosh, dude? Vosh denies he denounces Stalin. Ask him about Castro. I'm telling you, if you guys are ever debating Vosh and he tries to tell you, no, dude, I'm not a tanky. I disavow Stalin. Ask him about Castro because he said that Castro was different. Well, I got news, dudes. Castro killed about 5,000 people at a minimum. Like, we don't even need to get into the liberal estimates. So we're talking like the most conservative is he killed 5,000 people politically executed, right? But Vosh is going to say, yeah, that's different than Stalin. Why? Because Cuba had a smaller population. Imagine that Castro ran the Soviets. You think things would have gone differently? No. That's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. He was a wannabe Stalin. He killed a ton of people. So this idea that Vosh isn't a tanky, no, he is a tanky. Ask him about Castro. Again, I'm serious. If any of you are ever debating him, Wyatt, Kirk, Zayas, all these guys here, if any of you ever find yourself debating Vosh and he tries to BS you and say he's not a tanky or whatever, ask him about Castro. That's my advice. You can stump him, win the debate right there. Equally distributed starvation. Kirk says the Marxist intellectual Richard Wolff said that he doesn't find the death tolls in communist countries to be a terribly useful metric. Oh, I wonder why. It's kind of inconvenient, isn't it? You know, one country kills 500 people, another country kills 8 million people. But the country that killed 8 million people, they were trying to like do communist stuff. So it's okay. And the country that killed 500 people, they were trying to do chud stuff. So it's bad. Yeah, you know you're a communist. You know you're a flaming communist when you say, let's not talk about the death toll. You know you're a tanky win. Huh. Thomas Jefferson says, oh, it's Jay right there. Says, down with communism. I agree. I'm not down with communism, but down with communism. Yes, Wyatt says, I find it so cringe how communists fetishize bread. Well, you know, it's kind of the same way that a lot of fascists fetishize, you know, young Asian women. Let's keep it real, because they're not getting any. Likewise, with the communists, they're not getting any bread. So, you know. Oh, man. Zaya says he loves the Bernie Bro Zoomer meme. Oh, yeah, we'll bring that back on screen again. They're triggered, dude. They're going to watch this later on, too, and be like, can you believe what Kevin said? He said that communism and fascism are both bad. Oh, what a chud. What a fascist. No, I can just imagine it right now. Oh, dude, the people on sock Twitter are going to be triggered, dude. They're going to look like this right here, dude. Bread with invisible borscht. That's for dinner. Kirk says Stalin needed to take over half of Europe to save the Eastern Europeans from the horrors of capitalism. Yeah, that was an unironic take earlier on Twitter. There was a member of the Brainlet Brigades that actually made that argument. What a joke. Kirk says, better to take bullets from the Bolsheviks than have your labor stolen from a corporation. No, that's exactly it, dude. Capitalism bad, capitalism spooky. Communism? Oh, yeah, dude. Like, the only thing worse than working a minimum wage job is like what would they say? It's like, oh yeah, you know, it's better. Working a minimum wage job is worse than dying in starvation. Yeah, the modern left would kill everyone who agrees with them. Well, that's the thing is Vosh would be one of the first to get purged. Like the actual full honest tankies, they would make it to the power struggle phase. A lot of them would die too, but Vosh, oh, he's getting the Zinoviev treatment, man. Like they're gonna take him to Vladimir prison, and he'll be like, but you promised you wouldn't do this, and they'll be like, yeah, but the great leader revoked his promise, bro. And then, you know, take out a Makarov, bolt to the head, done and dusted, maggots in the ground, right? Like I said, again, the only thing deep, bro, about communism is the mass graves. You can quote me on that. You can quote me. Why it says famines end up killing millions in communist nations because the government sees the death they are causing with their system, but value the system over feeding people. Well, you know, Kim Jong Il was honest about it. He oversaw the deaths of 3 million people in the famine in the 1990s, the arduous march, as they termed it. And he was asked, you know, according to memoirs, not like of those who were around him, generals and stuff, you know. Well, like this is kind of bad for the country, but Kim said this is a victory for us because those who died could no longer do a revolution against him. Because of course those who died were the people in the countryside, those who were not allowed in Pyongyang. And North Korea is like the Hunger Games. You're only allowed to live in the capital and be one of the 10% of the people that are the elites there if you are deemed in the loyal Songbun. Now, there are about 50 different Songbun, but there are three major classes of Songbun. They're very classist society in that sense. And so it all goes back to what your family was doing during the Korean War, how loyal you were to Kim Il-sung and the eternal president, this kind of stuff. And so but there are three major categories of Songbun. The first is the loyal class. They're about 10% of the population. They get to live in the capital. Nobody else gets to live in the capital. Don't even try going to the capital. Second is the wavering class. They're viewed with intense suspicion. And then there's the hostile class, which is about 2/3 of the country. Most of those who died in the famine were the hostile class. So they were forced to live in the countryside, that kind of stuff. So Kim Jong-il looked at that and said, well, not many of the elites starved. The hostile class starved. The lowest Songbun starved. Those that were relegated to live in Chongjin starved. That's a victory for us because now it means that they can't storm the capital. So Kim Jong-il viewed that victory, even though it wasn't done on purpose, per se, because it happened because of the sanctions. It happened because the Soviets collapsed, right? He didn't see it as a loss. He saw the country as better without those 3 million people. So, look, I hate communists, okay? I freaking hate these people. And I hate those people out there that are going to try to say that these people are better than fascists. They're not. In many ways, they're worse. Kirk says, just look at the way the left now talks about Obama and Warren. In 2014, Warren was the darling of the left. Bernie Sanders stole all our thunder. Now Warren is a corporate snake. Oh, yeah. Like, look at how Young Turks, look at how all these outlets talk about Warren. What do they call her? They call her a liberal feminist. They call her a corporate elitist and stuff. And she is kind of an ivory tower elitist kind of person. Don't get me wrong. She's out of touch as hell. She's more out of touch than Hillary Clinton ever was. Way out of touch. She's a Harvard prof. She looked so cringe when she did her little beer stunt and pretended to be working class. That was cringe. I'm telling you right now, that was cringe. But she was the darling of the left for a long time. That is true. And now look at her. She's seen as a far-right chud, essentially. So you know we're moving in a dark direction when Elizabeth Warren is seen as like too far right. Elizabeth Warren is very far left. She's seen as too far right. Pathetic. So Nicholas says, oh, that's iconoclastic. FDR is usually revered in POTUS rankings. Yeah, by brainlets. Brainlets who do POTUS rankings, sure. Communists who do POTUS rankings, sure. Like, don't get me wrong. If I was a socialist or a communist, I'll tell you this straight up. Having like looked at American presidents and everything, despite what Fox News would say about Obama being like number one because he's a communist or whatever. No. If I were an actual communist, FDR would be my favorite U.S. president of all time. Like, and it wouldn't even be close. Like, Obama wouldn't even be anywhere near that. Like, Eisenhower, in some ways, would be closer to FDR than Obama would. Now, I'm not a fan of Obama, but I think the idea of Obama as like a communist is stupid. It's goofy. It's goofy. Like, I one day, if Fox ever offered me a job, if they offered me a slot, I would still do this show. This show would still be my priority, but I would do the segment because I get to reach the Zoomers here and I get to reach the Boomers there. So it would kind of complement what I'm doing here. I like Fox News generally. I think it's cringe how they've acquiesced and gone in the sycophant direction of Donald Trump. It's weak, but they'll come back around and they'll get hawk-pilled again for sure. So I would work at Fox. In fact, Fox is the only of the major American networks that I would consider working for. I would be too embarrassed to work at CNN. CNN is just all, Trump bad, Trump bad. Oh, Trump did something good? Oh, now we have to say it's bad. BS. MSNBC is even worse. And like, Rachel Maddow gets some stuff right. I think she's done some good reporting on Russia. But like, let's keep it real. If Mitt Romney was president, you think she would be doing segments about Russia? No, she'd be calling Mitt Romney a warmonger for talking tough about Russia. So if I'm at Fox, I'm speaking my mind. I'm not going with any narrative. Now, I wouldn't last too long there if a Trump person ever took over again. But if the Hawks take over and we have a neocon renaissance, would be kind of cool to get a job over there and tell Tucker Carlson, like, hey, dude, I know you got big ratings, but you're done, son. You're out. They want a Hawk now. That'd be pretty dope. I'm too young for that. That's too far off. But that would be based. That would be Hawk-pilled. So And like I said, I would do it for free. I do it for free. Like assuming I could do this show here on Superpower Broadcasting full time revenue from this, I would do it for free. So that'd be a hand over the competition for sure. So they're all gonna be like, I want like $20 million a year or whatever. It's like for me, it's like I don't care about money as long as I'm able to get my message out. You know what I'm saying? So as long as I'm able to pay the bills, get by, save some money, I don't care. You know? We got a troll here. Nicholas says, I'm way after FDR and Reagan's times and a non-American, so I'd love to see a contemporary debate about them. Well, you know, depending on who it is, I'm open to debating that. I'll represent Reagan. They can represent FDR. Be a good debate. Nicholas says, Warren was a sacrificial lamb this election. She took all the veiled sexism they hit Hillary with in 2016, but without any of the gains. Oh, yeah. Zaya says, replace Gutfeld with Kevin Castley 2020. I agree. Let's do it. Let's get that trending on Twitter. So we're caught up on the chat. We got much longer than I was planning on going, but we had a good chat tonight. So I'm going to end this right now, but be sure to like this video. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet. If you'd like to support what I'm doing and help make this financially viable, you can go over to Patreon. My Patreon is in the link in the description below. Once we hit $100 a month, I will begin rolling out daily pre-recorded videos premiering to YouTube like I used to do, plus these daily streams airing live to Twitch and YouTube. We're at $64 a month right now, so 36 more dollars to go. Every dollar matters. So that's what we got there. If you'd like to send a tip, though, my PayPal is also in the description below, and I appreciate all of your support. I am trying to get up to 50 followers on Twitch right now so that we can make a run for affiliate status. So if you can go and follow me over on Twitch, that'd be based. Link is in the description below as well. And with that, thank you all for being here tonight, and I will be back tomorrow. So you all have a good day.